Hi to everyone. Thanks a lot for having invited me. First of all, I would like to apologize for my probably strong French accent, and also for the fact that I want to be extremely fluent in English because I'm not practicing at all. And if it can help us or help me to be a little more decontract, I would like to ask you if you agree, like anyone, just one person will be like sufficient. If at points I point something on the screen, like explaining a graph, or if one of you could take a picture for my grandmother, she will be like extremely. So don't hesitate to take one picture. And then, yeah, I choose this title, which is not perfect, but I like it for two reasons. That's to boost perspective taking. First of all, it will, like, in a way, summarize different studies that I want to present to you. And second of all, I thought that if we want to stimulate or to generate new ideas, we have to doubt about what we know in order to interact in the best way possible, like between or different perspectives. So I won't spend too much time on this because you're probably already like all convinced about let's say, but it is important to consider also perspectives of our own. Especially to avoid interdivisional conflicts, for example, and especially with close relatives like family members, partner, romantic partners, etc. Also, having an impairment on the ability to consider other perspectives of our own, likely to major social impairment, to extreme isolations, to inability to work, etc. And it is present in a lot of pathology, as of psychiatry, in psychiatry, or in neurological disorder. And finally, but this is probably less developed in the literature, but there are a lot of studies growing in that field. It is essential in a care context. Like if you want to have a good therapeutic alliance with your patients, you need to take their perspective in order to be able to give advice or recommendations that will be followed by your patients, and also to avoid like tension or fights or violent misconduct with patients. And I wanted to address one study, like very briefly, about this last case, because we are all, or most of us, clinicians and specialists of like, care context. But we conducted a national study on with French neuropsychologists a few years ago, to ask them what they knew about social cognition and what of confidence they feel when dealing with social cognition with their patients. We asked 375 psychologists specialized in neuropsychology, and also to students, like 130. This might seem a little, but in fact, this is something like a quarter of the national neuropsychologists, and almost all the students of in neuropsychology per year, because we have something like 10 masters of neuropsychology in France, and so like with around 50 students per master. And what we found is that so the question was how confident you are when you have to assess or to rehabilitate either social cognition, memory, and executive function. And clinicians feel very confident when having to either assess or rehabilitate some memory and executive function, and feel pretty unconfident, like below the mean, when they have to rehabilitate social cognition. So I think that this is an important message. It is not only important to study social cognition, but also probably to teach a lot about it and to allow an important hour of teaching to students, and like clinicians are also in demand. And when we asked to, so we couldn't ask this question to the students because they do not practice for the moment, but we asked them if they feel sufficiently trained about social cognition. And the vast majority say, no, we are not sufficiently trained. We could like oppose that most of the students will always complain, and probably they will like say the same for other topics. But we had few control questions, and concerning memory or executive function, most of the students were largely satisfied. So it is not only important to consider other perspectives at our own, but also to study how we can consider other perspectives at our own. And I will try to give a very brief overview of the questions that stimulates me this last year and will probably stimulate me on the following years. I'm interested in what's in common and what is specific to different kind of perspective taking. Is it because I consider your emotional perspectives that I will also consider your visual-spatial perspective, for example, or cognitive perspective, or etc. I'm interested in how to develop or rehabilitate perspective taking abilities, and in particular in patients. And I will speak a little about this today, if I have time. I don't really know if it's possible or not. I'm interested in how psychiatric and neurological disorders are associated with perspective taking impairments, and I should not address that topic today. All social factors lead us to prioritize a given perspective, and I would like to address this topic also if I have time. And finally, in all culture influence perspective taking abilities, and I won't address this topic today. And then I will present you a short comic strip that I will have to translate because it's in French. Which we use for our experiments, and you could be like the participants of the experiment today, but you will have to be like please forget that we are in a perspective taking workshop today. Please put you in the shoes of naive students. So it's a story about two characters, and one of the two characters said, "Oh, I'm thirsty. Bring me something to drink." The other say, "Fine, I go right there. Here is a glass of lemonade." Oh no, I don't like lemonade. Bring me something else. Here is a glass of water. No, bring me a good book. I would like to read a little. Fine, I go right there. I found this book. Oh no, I don't like this book. Bring me another one. I found this one, but I can't read without my glasses, so bring me them. I only found these glasses. Are those this one? But no, it's not my glasses. You definitely don't do anything right. And then we ask participants, according to you, at this precise moment, what does this person feel? What would you think? This is the good answer, but people, you should not be able to respond to that question. But in fact, participants are not troubled at all and respond really easily. And most of them respond is probably extremely sad because they do a lot of efforts and you never get any nice word in response, etc. And here I present you the proportion of participants who took spontaneously the perspective of the low power individual in black, of the high power in white, and we take the double perspective who say, I cannot respond to that question, or the red one said this thing is probably angry, and the green one is probably sad, etc. But you can see that the vast majority of participants spontaneously take the perspective of low power individual in that context. We have replicated this experiment with professional actors who interact with each other. And I really like this picture because they are not even speaking, and the dominant one is the smallest one, but you can immediately perceive that he is the dominant one, is in charge. And we found exactly the same results, or almost the same results, with the vast majority also of participants who took the perspective of the low power individual, even in real situation with real humans. We tried an alternative with two conditions, a high despotism condition and a low despotism condition. In the two conditions, you have one person who gives orders and the other person who obey to these orders. But in one condition, that one is a really mean person, and in this condition is just the boss. And what we found again is that the vast majority of participants took the perspective of the low power character, but when it's in a low despotism condition, results are more nuanced, and most of the, not most, but a lot of proportion of participants this time take the perspective of both participants. But still, the majority took the perspective of the low power individual. And we have interpreted this effect as an underdog effect. We like people who are the underdog. We like the low power people. And it's the case in like popular story, in Rocky Balboa, in Cinderella. Also, there was a movie that I liked a lot when I was a child. It was Rasta Rocket. I don't know if you know that movie or if it's the same title in English, but it's about the Jamaican team who can finally get to the Olympic game to participate in bobsleigh competition. And also, we were all very enthusiastic about the Jamaican team. So what's important, it's not only to have despotism condition, but we will be spontaneously inclined to take the perspective of the underdog, of the low power individual when attending to a scene with multiple agents. And we are replicating these experiments with like a arbitrary distribution of money. So it's just people taking money. And by the end, one person has a lot of money and one person has like no money or almost no money. And we found the same results. And also we tried this fair competition, like in Rasta Rocket. So fair competition, you have two friends, but one of them is always winning at soccer, at chess, at basketball, at board game. And by the end, they both like say the same sentence, what a day, think about the same sentence, what a day. And we ask participants, what does this person think at this precise moment? And once again, we found that all the person, or the majority, like 80% of participants, take the perspective of the underdog. So there are situations in which it is like easy, very easy to take the perspective of other person. But in other contexts, it could be extremely difficult to take the perspective of other person, especially when you interact with close relatives or friends, and when you are in a situation of cognitive load, then you are less able to switch perspective. And this relates to something that it's called naive realism. I don't know if you're familiar with that idea. Okay, okay, perfect. It's the idea that, like, on a everyday basis, you trust your perception, you trust your knowledge, and you don't have to doubt about it, because if I see something, I don't know, blue, like it's probably blue. If I see the bottle at that distance, I know that I can grasp it, and if I think I don't know that it's raining, it's probably raining. And so you don't doubt about what you know, and you don't doubt about what you perceive. But in some context, and then because you think that you perceive things as they are in an objective way, if someone doesn't perceive them as you do, that person is probably wrong. But this is the notion of naive realism. You have the idea that you perceive reality. But because we are all psychologists, we know that we don't perceive reality. We are constantly interpreting reality to produce representations about reality. But we, most of the time, forget that we are not perceiving reality. And this is why we were, like, recently extremely interested in the use of visual illusion, because when we experience visual illusions, for a brief moment, we know that our brain or our mind is tricking us. Like, for a brief moment, we know that we cannot trust our perception anymore. But it will last only a few minutes, but during these few minutes, we doubt about our perceptions. For example, this is an illusion I like. You should probably see a yellow moon and a blue moon on the right side. Yeah? But in fact, both moons are exactly the same. Okay, show you maybe short animation. Yeah. It is to convince you if ever you were not convinced. But it's like the exact same moon. But your brain doesn't want to integrate that. Your brain sees a blue moon on the right and a left moon on the left. And so we thought, but it's not even us who discovered it, but some scientists thought that maybe we could use illusions to, like, force people to open their mind or to consider alternatives. This is precisely what did Ayumi Kombara, who used illusion. I don't know if it works. From my point of view, it doesn't work at all, but this one is supposed to induce motions. Yeah? Okay, perfect. And this is just the control condition on the right side. She presents illusions on piece of paper to her participants and asks them to memorize the patterns. So two conditions, one control condition and one experimental condition. And in the experimental condition, no, that's all. That was 2 minutes presentation of visual illusions. And then she has participants all at which point they are affected by different psychological bias. She said psychologists that claim that people generally show this bias. And then she used 7 classical bias and give examples and asked our participants if they think they present that bias. With the idea that if you doubt about your objectivity, about your ability to perceive the world in an objective way, then you might feel more inclined to present those bias. And she asked that question about to our participants about themselves and about others. How do you think that others will present that bias? Here are the results. You can see that, like, as a main effect, we all consider that others are more like impregnated with this bias than we are. Like, we are more objective than others. Probably the other is wrong. But also there's a difference between the two groups of participants who have to judge about their own propensity to display this bias, with an increase in the illusion group, probably because people feel less confident about their ability to perceive the world in an objective way. And this is something we have tried to replicate, and these are like extremely preliminary data. I received them yesterday, and I tried to integrate them in my presentation of today. We used also visual illusion that we presented to participants, and we had them to rate them like on how stimulating it is in the term of agreeability and in the term of surprising. How surprising are these illusions? We use motion illusions, but also like this kind of expansion illusion and size illusion. Those two cylinders could go like at the bottom of the corridor or in front, and when they are placed like on the bottom, you perceive them as bigger, even if they are like on the exact same size. Yeah, so when we ask like questions to our participants to, in a way, judge illusions, to make them consider the illusions, like, pay attention, and among the illusions, we also have them to look at those kind of figures and to estimate the number of triangles that are embedded in that figures. Honestly, I don't have the answer. It's at least something like 150 at the minimum, but probably more. And so participants respond, and then we say, okay, for your information, you should know that the last participants who respond to that question responded 164. You have the opportunity to give a new response. Would you like to change your response? And our hypothesis was that if participants are more doubting about their ability to perceive the world, they should be more inclined, after having been exposed to illusions, to consider the perspective of another person as a way to get closer to the reality. Because if you cannot trust your own perception, maybe you should consider alternatives. Classically, in this type of paradigm, you do not allow the same weight to other persons than to yourself. And if it's like, if you're, it can be a little tricky to explain. Okay, you will manage to consider both your perspective and other perspective. But if you give the same weight to both perspectives, then your response will be like in the middle. You will change your response in the direction of the other response, but doing a perfect mean of the two responses. And so, like, as a proportion between your original response and other response, you should arrive at something like alpha and 4.5. if you stay at 0, then you keep your initial response, and if you go to 1, then you completely take the other participants' response. And what we found is that in the control condition, people are around 1.3, which is like what is classically reported in the literature. And in the illusion condition, people tend to consider more or goes more towards the response of the other participants. And finally, this was the previous experiments were about 2D illusions, and they're the last kind of illusions I would like to abord like in a few minutes. This is something that we have started to implement it with patients in the early stage of schizophrenia. These are particular type of illusions which does not only make you doubt about your ability to capture reality, but who also show you or impose you the fact that there could be different reality or different perspective on a similar object. And in particular, those are objects that are created by Japanese mathematicians specialized in ambiguous shapes, who like spend his whole life in creating ambiguous objects. And these objects, for example, can be perceived as a square from a perspective and as a circle from another perspective. And I bring one of these objects with me. If you want to try, I will like give it to you. You have to close one eye, otherwise it won't like work that efficiently. And approximately put it, yeah, this way. Like from my perspective, this is clearly a square right now. And if you like turn it, you will perceive a circle. Please try. So approximately that angle with your arm, but I'll let you try. And then we thought that this could be a good way to show to patients that not only your perspective on the world is like the objective way of seeing the world, but that there are many perspectives on the world that are equally true or equally valid. And we have constructed like big boxes who contain those kind of objects, and we ask participants to act in dyads and to interact. And with one clinician, one neuropsychologist who asks them, okay, what do you see? One of the participants, of the patients said, I see like range of square. The other said, no, it's a range of circle. And we make them debate. Most of the time, it's like not not a really peaceful debate, because everyone is like absolutely convinced that he perceives reality. Then we make them change position, and it's like honestly, it's incredible the effects it has on them. Like, but sometimes they ask us for a few minutes of break, because it's like the whole world is collapsing. And we have developed a series of those kind of objects with 2 arrows that can point in different direction or in the same direction, etc. All based on geometrical parameters. And we have also other objects. At this point, we have something like 15 boxes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said they had an effect on these people. They ask you a break sometimes. Is
Yeah.
it like patients?
Yes.
Schizophrenic patients?
Yeah.
Okay. But the healthy people don't have this.
Not this kind of like very big effect, like as if the world will collapse and they don't trust anything anymore. But even on healthy people, you can see that it's quite a shock, and that it will probably change the way they interact in the minutes or maybe hours that will follow. And I will present you like really encouraging data we have with these first patients. You're all familiar with the faux pas task? Yes, perfect. Just like in few seconds, I don't know if you're aware with this task, but we have conducted a study with Maxime Berthoud in 15 countries, and we have shown like extreme variability on the faux pas task between countries. And for example, in China, let your seat in the bus would be perceived as a faux pas, which is not the case even if it's a control story, which is not the case in England, etc. And like participants who have the best score are the one from England, which is probably a test of English norms rather than of like theory of mind or perspective taking. Like, yeah, to give you an example, it explains something like 25% of variance on the effect of culture, while the effect of gender was something like 2% of the variance. So it's 10 more times important than the effect of gender, which is always considered in our study. If you want to publish about emotion, you have to consider gender and to verify that it doesn't influence. Nobody's asking about culture, but probably it's like way more important. But let's go back to the experiments. And then we ask participants to fill the FOPA task before and after having been exposed to what happened. And what we found with our first patients, so at this point we have 15 patients that have been trained with these boxes, is that we significantly increase their score at the FOPA task, but only for the FOPA stories. There's no effect on the control stories, for example. So it encourages us a lot. So it's as if, and it will come back, I will come back with this last slide to an initial question that stimulates me a lot. So it seems that there are links between different kinds of perspective taking. You can stimulate people on the visuospatial domain, showing them that they cannot rely on their own perceptive ability and observe effects on more cognitive or emotional domain. Because if you cannot trust, or if another person can perceive something else than you do and being equally right, then maybe he can think or feel something different than you do and still be equally right. And on this last slide, I will thank you for your attention, and thanks a lot of collaborators, and I'm probably like forgetting a lot of other collaborators. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much, François. It was very interesting. So different look on perspective, basically, in a very relevant societal context. Like, what would be your take? What would you think is the more important step that they, the patients, for instance, but you could potentially extrapolate it also to developers? So is it more important to learn that you yourself can have a different perspective from another viewpoint? Or is it more important that you start doubting yourself? Or maybe it's a different story for patients than for...
Yeah, that's really good questions. The short response will be, I don't know at this present moment. And we are investigating both types of illusions. 2D illusions, we should just increase depth, but not increase your tendency to consider other perspectives. And like 3D illusions with topological disrupting objects, we should encourage you to consider alternative perspective because that is the way they are conceived. So like ask me this question in 1 year or 2 years, and I should be able to provide you a more confident response. For the moment, I'm not sure. From the developmental perspective, we tried, because once we have developed those series of boxes, we want to like expose them a lot, and people are really inclined, people like illusions. So it's not difficult to recruit participants. You go to a museum, you put your boxes, and you ask participants if they want to have a look. And everyone wants to have a look. So we have had the opportunity to use them with children. And what's really funny, maybe, but it won't help to respond to you in a convincing way. But what's funny is that it's not a problem for children that one of them is looking a square and the other looking a circle. Then they change perspective and say, it's magical. And they go to a study panel. It's magic trick. Yeah, but they don't care at all. It's not a problem for children.
Okay, that's interesting. How old are these kids?
I'm not an expert in children, but Yeah, this one.
They made it.
No, I don't know. It's something like 6 years old. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. Really interesting. I got a picture for your grandma as well.
Thanks a lot.
And you were pointing. Perfect. So, a question about the first experiment, which I found really interesting. So, the one where you had the high power, low power thing going on. So, part of it, how was the question delivered to participants? Was it an experiment or was it like a line at the bottom? So the thing I'm trying to get at here is, were participants actually taking the perspective of the experimenter? Or were they, and also, even if they were not, how do you explain why they prefer the low power? But is it because they would be worried about being seen as thinking more about the dominant person because it might be more maybe I'm too familiar with that kind of style. I don't want to show that I'm familiar with that style. I want to show I'm familiar with the underdog style. So I think, well, I'll stop talking. What do you think?
Okay. This is something we considered, and also we measured like participants' tendency to participants. I don't know how to say it. All participants are inclined to legitimate hierarchy or those kind of stuff to see if it could be explained by personal attitudes or knowledge or thinking, way of thinking. What I can say is that if we ask participants, like the initial question is, at this precise moment, what do you think this person feels? And we tested this condition this question in 2 different contexts: in online presentation of the comic strip, in online presentation of the movies, and also in like small groups in those kind of situations with everyone having a questionnaire and they respond individually. And we don't see any difference between the different types of presentations. But there's one condition in which we observe a difference and in which people started to consider the dominant perspective. If you say, but the majority still consider the low power agents. But in these last conditions, people start considering the high power perspective. It's when you say, okay, now imagine that you will have to interact in this scene at this precise moment. What do you think this person feels? And if people think that they will have to interact, then what's become relevant is the perspective of the one that will probably bother you or order you something, because you have to survive. And in nature, you have to consider the perspective of the dominant, who can like exert pressure on you or threaten your physical integrity. And then in these conditions, people start to consider the perspective of the dominance. But like this is extremely, the fact that participants are more inclined to take the perspective of the low power individual is extremely congruent with other studies, like for example, the allocation of resource. If you ask participants to who they want to give money, they will all give money to the low power individual. So I think it's not that dependent of the experimental tasks or of the question that we used, because it's like extremely congruent with other findings in other fields of psychology in the way we manage resources, all those kind of stuff also.
But it was 3 buttons that to choose between.
No, it was an open question, and they write anything they wanted.
Okay.
And then we have blinded students, blinded to the hypothesis. students that are blind to the hypothesis, who were asked to interpret if they were speaking about the the low power agent or the high power agent. And sometimes you have participants that just respond one word, like he feels anger, for example, or if it's sadness. And sometimes you have like long stories about if like I want to cuddle that person, that's too unfair, etc. But yeah, like maybe 2 more if I have time for 2 more questions, but I don't know. You stay this case. Otherwise, we can speak about it like during lunch, let's say.
I think it was very quick. do you think it's low power, or we are so used to the travel of the hero that we like people that has an ascending trajectory, meaning that we will feel more like the low power because it's going to be the one about whom the story will be about and will have an ascending path. I mean, in all the narrative, it's all about someone with low power which has a trajectory, which does not happen the other way around, or less often.
That, I mean, I cannot respond based on my experiments, but I don't think that it will be the correct explanation. Also because, I don't know at which point it is convincing, but if you ask young children to perform those kind of tasks, they adopt the reversed patterns. They like they privilege the high power individual. And also if you ask children, young children, before the age of 8, to share resource, they give all the resource to the dominant one because you want to affiliate with the strong one. So I'm not sure because even in story we count to children like the hero is the poor one, the weak one, etc. But children want to affiliate with the one in charge. And the last one, maybe.
Quick question to all the speakers: do you think we can share our slides so that we don't have to take notes? It's
It's not to anyone.
it's not to anyone.
Well, it's also about, I mean, I'm very happy to, but Henrik, you're recording this, aren't you?
I do record it before. Yes. Exactly. So the camera is there. So, but it's not the slides. Yeah. But if you, I mean, we can nevertheless collect the PDFs. But some people have preliminary data, they might not want to put the slides.
But still remove the preliminary data.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But we would be happy to collect any PDFs and.
Yeah, two methodological questions. So regarding the low power.
Okay,
You got my file here, so it's-
I think we have to move on, otherwise we can discuss about it during lunch.
Thanks so much for
Thanks.